All right. Hello, everyone on Zoom too. I think you can now hear me. Um, I'm very excited today to bring Tim York, who's the manager of water conservation for the city of Aurora. And he joined Aurora's water conservation team in 2012. He earned a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture degree from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he's a Colorado licensed landscape architect. Prior to joining Aurora Water, he worked in the private sector in design and construction management roles across multiple states. He also taught for UNLV's landscape architecture program. As the manager of water conservation, Tim supports a large team of passionate water conservation professionals in program development, implementation, and analysis. And he will get into all the details of what Aurora is doing for water conservation, but from I guess a broader perspective, they are definitely one of the most progressive cities that I've seen anyway, implementing some of these policies and programs. So excited to hear from Tim. Let me just make sure. Okay, loud and clear. Great. So with that, go ahead, Tim.
Thank you, everybody.
Here's a clicker if you need it.
I will try not to put you to sleep since you seem like you may be halfway there, but I understand. I kind of as well. Welcome to everybody that's on Zoom. I actually noticed the name on Zoom of a past employee we had, so that's kind of exciting to see as well. I'm going to cover a few topics. If this works. Try the arrow button. Let me click on it. There we go. So I'm going to start a little bit on supply and demand, and I want to talk a little bit about the drought that we were just in this past year, or water supply availability shortage is what we called it. Drought is kind of a long-term thing, but Aurora was the only city in the state of Colorado that went into a heightened drought restriction in 2023. So I kind of want to tie that into the supply side of things and kind of how that played out and some of the things you heard in the news about snowpack, and how it doesn't necessarily, from a water supply standpoint, mean the same thing for all of the water utilities. And then I'll go ahead and dive into our municipal conservation program, a little bit on the history of water conservation specific to Aurora. We've been doing it a long time. I'm not going to cover all our programs. You'll see we have a bunch, but there's a few I want to make sure I highlight. New and existing development, there's a difference there on how you approach conservation in those two different groups. Who knows where Aurora is? I'll talk about it here in a second, but in case we have some out-of-state students, okay. We are growing very quickly, so how we address new development to grow sustainably is very, very important. And then I'll talk about some of the successes. Not everything we've done in water conservation has been a success, but we have made a lot of headway, not just in Aurora, but in the state in general. So a little bit about Aurora. We are on the kind of southeast side of Denver, kind of like Kansas west. We're expanding to the east. We are on the prairie. We are not in the mountains, and we don't get a lot of rain. We have about 400,000 people, still growing rapidly. We're doing 1,000 to 1,500 new homes per year. That's not including multifamily, commercial, industrial, those types of uses. Our treatment capacity is about 200 MGD, or 210 million gallons a day. On a peak day in the summer, we really only go through about 80 to 90 million. 90 is on the really, really high side. I say only. I say that to show that we have a lot more treatment capacity than we actually distribute, even on a peak day in the summer. Very important in the system, have a little bit of extra room. Our supplies, and I'll talk about our supplies in a little bit more depth, but we are primarily a surface water system. So about 95% of our water, as new water coming in, comes from snowmelt in the Colorado, the South Platte, and the Arkansas River Basin. We have storage capacity of about 156,000 acre feet. If you were to look at just the in-city demand, that's about 3 years worth of storage. But as you start building in-city demand and transit losses and evaporation and other commitments to water, it's closer to about 2 years worth of storage. We've also made some major investments in reuse, and I'm going to show a chart here in a little bit that talks about the percent of our capacity that is reused. Prairie Waters Project is an innovative indirect potable reuse system, so it's a way to use water indoors, goes through a treatment process, ends up back in the river. We're able to pull that back out and treat it and reblend it with our potable system. And then our Sand Creek facility, that's a traditional purple pipe system. So that's outdoor non-potable use only. And our capacity there is 5 MGD, 5 million gallons a day. That's mostly used for city facilities, golf courses, the municipal center landscapes, and some parks. It is important to note acquiring new water supply is extremely expensive, and it's going up year over year over year. I think our last price, so in our tap fees, we have we call it a water resources fee, and that's basically saying this is what it costs us to go buy this water. I think it went from 18,000 an acre foot to about 27,000 an acre foot in about 8 months. So the cost of new water is going up, which is why water conservation and reuse is so important. It's the cheapest water that we can get is water we already have in our system. So a little more in depth on our supply, 25% each from the Colorado River and the Arkansas River Basin, 50% from the South Platte River Basin. Colorado and Arkansas, you can see some of our reservoirs down there in the blue on the bottom right. It's a long ways away. Some of our water comes from 180 miles away. We don't actually pump water from down there. We do some paper transfers where we can transfer it back up, make a trade up in the mountains so we can get it over. But our water portfolio is very spread out. We have 12 reservoirs across the state, some that we own wholly, and some that we share with other utilities. The first picture you saw on the first slide is Spinney Mountain Reservoir. That's our largest reservoir up in Park County. So a little bit more on reuse. So other supplies, the green is that kind of snow melt, snowpack supply I talked about. The reuse water makes up about 20% of our annual supply. So that's a pretty big figure. The number in the middle, anybody know what LRFs are? LRFs are lawn irrigation return flows. So what happens is when we irrigate landscape, a portion of that water goes through the soil column, ends up back in the river. We actually measure that amount of water and we can bring that back into the system. The reason we can do that, and the same reason we can use prairie water systems for reuse water, is what's called owning till extinction. And when you have water resources that you're bringing into the city that are either trans-basin diversion, so all the water we bring from the Colorado River Basin and the Arkansas River Basin, and in a lot of cases, rights that are converted from agricultural rights to municipal rights, you can use those over and over and over again as long as you're meeting your return flows in the river. So a lot of times you have to leave a certain amount of water in the river for the next person. Timing plays into that as well, a certain amount of water at a certain amount of time. But as long as you're meeting those obligations, for most of our water, we have the ability to pull it back into the system and use it over and over and over. That's why reuse is so important to the city of Aurora. So I'm going to dive into the drought that impacted our resources this year, or the water availability is what we call it. So one of kind of our favorite pictures, if you watch the news over this winter, the only thing you heard was how great the snowpack was. Oh, we got 140% in the Colorado, 212%, I think, at one point in the Colorado, and 130 in the South Platte River Basin. And so we got a lot of questions from our constituents as we went into the stage 1 drought, where now we're ratcheting back demand through policy. It's like, well, the state's doing great on snowpack. I don't see the problem. Well, the problem is that when we look at state snowpack, we're using 114 snow measurement stations through the SNOTEL program. Aurora uses 16. So even though 50% of our water comes from the South Platte Basin, it comes from a very small part of the South Platte Basin. So at the same time period, if you were to look at the upper headwaters of the South Platte, which is where we get our water from, you can see the drastic difference in the chart on the right in the numbers. We had some SNOTEL sites reading at 76%, 78%. So we have to be very careful when we look at larger media, or we talk about statewide, how we're doing from a snowpack or an overall even water supply. You look at somebody's reservoirs and they're at 100%. Doesn't mean Aurora is. We all have our individual water resources that we have to manage. There is a chat, so I'm gonna click on it. Is your price rate for a single foot? So we got a question through the chat. Is your price for an acre foot a single acre foot or a water right to an acre foot each year? I don't think I understand the separation between those. We are purchasing an acre foot of water rights, which would be per year in essence, per water year. Oops. Then it rained. and it rained, and it didn't stop raining. If you look at the numbers on the left, that's our rain totals for 2019 to 2023. So if you look at the top numbers, the reason why we have adjusted numbers is when we look at precipitation, one of the things you can do is say, we got 15 inches of rain. Sounds super awesome. Problem is the soil can't hold 15 inches of rain. So we have to adjust those numbers to see how much of that rain, that precipitation, was actually usable by the plants that would otherwise be supplemented by irrigation. The way we do it, there's not really a standard way. Anything over 1/4 of an inch within a 24-hour period, we don't count. Because most of the soils in Colorado, especially if they're a clay loam soil, have about a 0.2 of an inch per hour infiltration rate. Get 1/4 of an inch, it's pretty much full. So we've adjusted those down, but it rained and it rained and it rained, and it made the farmers happy. So one of the things you have to consider when we talk about water supply is the water rights and the time of the water rights. So if you have a senior water right, which a lot of the agriculture on the South Platte is, if their obligation's not being met, we may have snow in our basin, but we can't capture it. We have to let it go down the river. The best thing about the rain, and I'll show you how our customers responded, but the best thing the rain did for us was keep the call off the river. So now we could yield the water, a little bit of snow that we actually had up in the South Platte Basin and the Colorado and Arkansas, and pull that into our system. So there's a lot of moving parts that have to happen on the water resources side, from owning the water right, actually getting the snow, actually being able to yield that water right, or do you have to pass it through to somebody else? So combined with being able to yield all of our rights that we had, because the call came off there with free river, meaning that there's no calls at all on the river, we were able to start yielding. This chart, I know it looks kind of ugly, but I wanted to show it. This is what our customers did. So if you look at the black line, this is daily demand. The black line's a 5-year average. And the red line is how our customers actually responded to all the precipitation that we received in May and June. And so we've been messaging through conservation for a long time, water efficiency. Let's use the water when we need it, on the right thing, for the right purpose and the right amount. If it's raining, don't irrigate. It seems simple, but you'd be surprised how often it happens. This is showing that the customers, our customers in Aurora, for the most part, were doing the right thing. We didn't need to irrigate our landscapes all of May and really all of June for the most part. And most people were doing the right thing, helping us to get our reservoirs back up. And I'm going to show some reservoir charts here in a little bit. A little bit of a cleaner chart. Monthly, this is outdoor distribution only. So the other chart actually shows total daily distribution. In this chart, we built a way to look at just outdoor use to see how that response was happening to the precipitation, to the weather that was going on. And that big delta is how much water demand was reduced because of the precipitation and because of our customers doing the right thing. So when you combine what our customers did, the right thing, and all of the water we were able to yield, this is what happened. So the red line's 2021, green's 2022, the purple line's 2023. I'm going to step away from the camera for a second. Hopefully you can hear me, but I want to point this out. So once you probably aren't old enough, but back in 2002 is when conservation really started in the state of Colorado, because we had a major drought. And this has always been kind of our warning. We can't get back. Well, if you look at the purple line, we were there. And so that's why in Aurora, we went into that stage 1 drought restriction. Is we were there, we were at that warning line. Not everybody was, but our reservoirs were below 50%. Snowpack, as I showed in the chart for where we get our snow, wasn't really that great. And we're thinking, all right, we got to do it. But every time you have a drought stage, this seems to happen. We got all that yield, customers did the right thing, and we were able to recover our reservoirs very well. I think we're still at 85% plus, but you can see how high that purple line peaks all the way back to 2019. So a bad thing turned out really, really good, but that can happen anytime. It doesn't take too many years when you have 2 to 3 years of storage of bad snowpack and bad yield to push you back down to that low line. So We've recovered, which is good, but that data shows why we ended up where we ended up from a drought standpoint. All right, so let's talk about what I really came here to talk about, which is conservation. Yes.
Because the past drought, I heard times when the only like the institution where you help people use it and pay for customers who want to
Great question. So the question was about during the last drought, did we have to tell customers they could only irrigate, 2 days a week instead of 3? Did we acquire more water? And we did all those things. So we try to take a holistic approach. First, how can we potentially not have to go into drought restrictions? But eventually, as you can see in the line, you have no choice. So I'll go back to the previous slide. What you see on the purple line, these little bumps right here, that's water acquisition. So that's a short-term lease that we were able to get to help kind of build that supply up. But you can tell it's not enough, right? But we do try to get leases when we can. There's other utilities that have extra water. We have a place to put it. If we can lease it, we will. The second part of the question, yes. So Aurora does have mandatory all the time, no more than 3 days per week water restrictions. We went down to 2 for the stage 1 drought. Stage 2 would be 1 day. Stage 3, no irrigation at all. But that's more of our Rampart pipeline broke coming into the system, or something that's an emergency is when we would go to stage 3. Did that answer your question? Okay. All right, so let's talk about how we conserve water. I think we first need to answer the question, what is water conservation, right? So you can think of water conservation as, I don't care how much water you're using, I want you to use less. Probably not the right approach, because eventually you can't use less, especially if we talk about indoor water conservation. You can only take so short of a shower. You're gonna go to the bathroom. Those things are just gonna happen. So there is a peak level, especially on indoor, this is the lowest we can use and live our normal lifestyle. Same thing on the landscape. If you have somebody who's got a water-wise, low-water landscape or native grass, and they're using the amount of water they should be using, I can't go ask them to use less. So it's really about efficiency. In some cases, it is about saving water. It's about finding those that are overusing water and getting them to come down. And in other places, as I'll show you in some of our programs, it's about getting to this level and maintaining that level of efficiency. So how do we get everybody to this high level of efficiency? And then conservation becomes, how do we keep them there, right? That's kind of the behavioral part of it. But I do want to mention something before we get started here. So it's important to note, and this is from the state of Colorado, municipal and industrial, meaning city water use, is about 7% of the entire state's water consumption. 7%. So we could cut off all the cities, we'd save 7% across the state. We could cut out all the outdoor landscape and have rock and concrete. We'd save maybe 3%. But it doesn't mean it's not important. It'd be real easy to look at these numbers and go, why does it matter? We're not impacting the state water. We're not. But as I showed in the previous slides, we all kind of have our own water portfolio. And so if you sum up what all of the great conservation programs across the state on the municipal side are doing, you have a great one here in Fort Collins Utilities, Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, Denver. We all have conservation programs. And even all together, they don't impact the state's water use that much, but they do have a huge impact on our own water portfolios. So I show this to kind of make the point of M&I water is a small part of the state, but doesn't mean conservation is not important. I do like to pat ourselves on the back in all my presentations. We are one of 3 platinum recognized water conservation teams in the entire country. Anybody can apply. It doesn't mean that everybody's applied and we're the only ones that won. We just take the time to apply, but it looks really cool because there's not a lot of awards out there for conservation teams. So I like to share that one. Aurora's been doing water conservation for a long time. Aurora Water was founded around 1950. Previous to that, we were getting water from Denver Water, but we continue to expand and we're kind of told we needed to do our own thing. So we started Aurora Water. You can see our first watering restrictions back in 1952. Not so much related to drought, but you can see that there was a time where there was a water shortage. We needed water restrictions. Since then, we've been growing. As I mentioned, in 2002 is when things really kicked off as a response to the drought, very reactive, to where now conservation programs tend to be very proactive. And we've continued to grow. We currently have 9 full-time staff, 4 year-round, actually 5 now, 5 year-round contract positions. And in the summer, we go to 26 people total. So we're the largest conservation program in the state of Colorado. And I promised I would talk about potential jobs. We'll talk about that at the end. If I forget to talk about it, please bug me, because we do have internships. And working in conservation is a unique experience that you don't have to have a degree in water conservation, because I don't know of one. This is just kind of an overview of our team and all the things we do. Since this is published, you'll have access to it. But it really shows the uniqueness of our team. We are now currently under what's the water supply and demand team. So for the past couple decades, water conservation has been within the public relations group. And we made a change this year in January. So now water supply and water demand are within the same team, which makes a ton of sense, right? Because if you think about water conservation, in a way, you're also trying to get supply. You're just trying to get it from your current customer base. You're trying to get that supply back that you already have. So it's been a great kind of merger of teams, new challenges, tons of new learning experience, but it's a lot of fun. So we have about 25 water conservation programs and outreach methods that we use with our customers, and our customers are across all sectors. So residential, which is most often single family detached, multifamily, commercial, and then we have irrigation only accounts as well. So water that only serves irrigation. The important thing to note on this slide is that all of the ones in blue primarily focus on outdoor water use. So kind of how I talked about water efficiency on the indoor side, a lot of the indoor items were kind of the low-hanging fruit through rebate programs, legislation at the federal and at the state level. We've made a lot of headway on the indoor water efficiency side of things. And we're really focusing on that, what we would call non-recoverable water. So since we have that prairie water system that I talked about, where we can recapture and reuse that water, it doesn't mean indoor water conservation isn't important, but it's the outdoor water that we can't recapture, right? That's the water we're truly losing. So we focus most of our programs on outdoor use, although we still have a couple pretty popular indoor programs. I'm not going to touch on all of the outdoor programs for the sake of time, but I do want to touch on a couple that are pretty important. So the first one that a lot of utilities are doing, we all seem to do it a little bit different. I think we change our program every year as we learn and try to provide the best product for our customers that we can. We call it GRIP. We always try to come up with something catchy for the customers. Previous to this, it was Water-Wise Landscape Rebate, which was not catchy. But it's a program to convert Kentucky bluegrass primarily over to Water-Wise Landscape. Anybody in here know how much water, we'll just call it the Front Range, because you probably won't know Aurora. We'll see how close you get. How much water Kentucky bluegrass needs in one irrigation season, just of irrigation water, not including precipitation. And we can either do it in inches or we can do it in gallons per square foot. Anybody brave enough to guess? Nobody's brave enough to guess. So in Aurora, it's about 28 inches of water. So if the table's the ground, it's about that much water. It's about 17.5 gallons per square foot if the irrigation system is 100% efficient and it's an average year. I can promise you the irrigation system is not 100% efficient, maybe closer to 60 or 70. And every year obviously is not an average year. So it's a lot of water. Water-Wise Landscapes, on the other hand, at most, and I'm talking at most, is 15 inches. And we can get them all the way down to 0 with the right plant species. And they're not 100% dense, so you can start cutting that water back even more. So converting Kentucky bluegrass, especially if it's in an area that is only being used to mow and to water and to fertilize, makes a ton of sense. And so we put a lot of effort into converting these high water use landscapes for existing customers, and I'll talk about new development a little bit later. In our program, it's up to $4,000 per residential unit. We'll probably modify the payment structure again. That's one thing we've been changing every year. We also do commercial and multifamily, so you can have a large commercial development or the common space within a single family residential community, and we will help pay for that as well. Smart technology, we've seen a big change in irrigation technology over the last decade in both the residential sector and in the commercial sector. The commercial sector has been ahead for a while, but we're starting to see it last 5 to 10 years in the residential side as well. And really what we focus on here is smart irrigation controllers. So these are irrigation controllers that will use weather, either on site or through Wi-Fi. They'll go out and grab weather from the internet and help build an irrigation schedule. So if we look at the last 2 slides, there's the, let me help you use less water in the conversion. And this is the, let me help you use the right amount of water. So we can get them to convert the landscape and do this. 2 thumbs up. Yes. Backyards will be eligible in 2024, but I can talk about why they weren't. So in this program, in the GRIP program, part of the idea was if we can put the money, because you only have so much money, right? So you're trying to put it where you have the most bang for the buck. If we can get people to convert their front yards or convert spaces that are publicly visible, the hope is that the next door neighbor is going to do it too. Or someone down the street may do it and not even ask for a rebate. So you're trying to spread the awareness. We think we're at a point now to where the awareness is out. And so we will be offering backyard rebates for 2024. Great question. On the smart irrigation technology, we're essentially paying for the controller, no cost to them. One of the challenges with these in conservation is it's one thing to put in a smart irrigation controller or weather-based irrigation controller. It's another thing to make sure they're actually using it in smart mode, because you don't have to. And so a lot of it is, here's the education that comes after the incentive. These also are available for commercial and multifamily customers. We developed a pretty unique rebate structure for a particular large property in the city of Aurora, where they came to us and said, hey, look, we're going to spend like $500,000 to do this irrigation controller upgrade. How much can we do? And we said, well, let's see what we can do on helping pay for the materials, because we don't pay for labor or tax, materials only. And we said, well, you have this allocation in the billing system, this water allocation every year, and you don't get penalized till you go over it. And it wasn't set the right way. It was, I won't get too much on it, but it adjusted every year based on the previous 2 years' usage. Not a great way to do allocations. So they, in a way, they would get almost awarded if they overused, right? Because their allocation will go up. So we said, well, if you let us map your property and we come to an agreement on what your allocation should be in the billing system, and then you exceed that, meaning you didn't save any water, you get to pay the rebate. And they said, deal. We gave them $275,000, and we saved, I think, 10 million gallons the first year. So it's finding these creative ways and partnerships to protect the public money, because this is public money, and say, hey, we're willing to pay for this water. We're buying the water. But if they don't save it, they're paying us back. So that was a really, really cool project. They continue to save a bunch of water, and it built a relationship with them where they've done a bunch of conversions now too. So we are open to these kind of one-off unique rebates. Water management plan, back to the question about what we did during drought as far as watering days. We do have a water management plan. Somewhat talks about when we go in and out of drought, but it really governs the use of irrigation throughout the summer. Part of it's in effect from May 1st through the end of September, which is why our team gets so big, because we have water monitors that are out monitoring what's going on in the city. No watering between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. during that time. No watering more than 3 days per week, anytime during the year. We do allow irrigation between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. during the kind of shoulder seasons, because we don't want to get it on the sidewalk and freezing. I don't want it on the sidewalk at all, but you know you're going to get a little bit there, and we don't want it to freeze. We also require permits for new landscapes. So any installation of sod must go through a permit process where we check the soil amendment and till depth. We also check their irrigation system. The water management plan also says if you have a leak, something's broken, you're watering the sidewalk, you have runoff, we're going to stop by. You get 3 days to fix it. You don't fix it, we come back, you get a fine. You get 3 more days. You don't fix it, we come back again, the fine goes up. So we're really trying to curb water waste in this water management plan. Know Your Flow is a newer program to us about 6-7 years ago. And this was a way to use an educational component, not education as in come to our conservation class and listen to us talk, more educational on let us give you a bunch of information and teach you how to understand how you're using water. Free voluntary program. Think of it as a water budget program, but it's not tied to the water bill. Customers sign up. They tell us how many people live in their home. We do a GIS map of their property so we can assign vegetation covers. Then we use current weather data and give them a monthly report card on how they're doing. This is how much water you should use. This is how much water you did use. And it's been really successful. It gives information, but it also opens up this communication line between the customer and the conservation program. When I talked about saving water versus water efficiency, we analyze this program a little bit different. So a lot of our programs, if they're going through an incentive program, we want to see a change in consumption year over year. So we'll analyze the year they participate in the program. We'll look at the year before, the year after data. We will normalize for weather. If it is an outdoor program, and know your flow, what we're trying to do is help people become efficient and then get them to stay there. So we're trying to understand if we get them to this efficient level, can we get them to stay there simply by giving them information? Yes. Anybody can participate. Yep. Yeah, it's open to everybody. So we advertise it, they sign up. We started doing an opt-out program. So if they participate in one of our other programs, that's an outdoor program, we automatically sign them up and start sending them emails. If they want to opt out, they let us know, we opt them out. So we started making the conversion over to AMI meters, goodness, 3-ish years ago, maybe 4. We were supposed to be done. Everybody knows what happened. There was a little virus that went around a couple years ago, kind of put the hurt on the supply chain. So it's taken a little bit longer than expected, but AMI metering is advanced metering infrastructure. So AMR, which was our previous and currently what we still have about 50% installed, that's where you have this meter and someone drives around in a truck once a month and it sends a signal to the truck and we read it and we go, great, now we can send you a bill. We know how much water you used in the last 30 days. AMI changes the game. It allows us to look at water use at the 15-minute increment level if we want. Usually we look at it by the hour, but now it starts telling us not how much water did you use in the month, how much did you use yesterday, today, did you water every day, do you have a leak? That's the big one, right? Because before, if someone had a leak and it started on day 1 of their read cycle, you didn't know they had a leak for 30 days. Now they got a big bill and you got a lot of wasted water. So we're able to use this data to look at leak alerts and run some scripts that pull the data through an API and say, show me everybody that has a continuous flow leak. And the way that works is if there is a continuous flow through that meter, and it picks up a read every 15 minutes for a 24-hour period, that has a leak and it'll send us a notification. The better part is the customer can sign up for a leak notification. So they get a ping on their phone, hey, your water hasn't quit running, and they can fix it before we get to them, ideally. If they can't get to it, we'll find it, we'll give them a call. But it's really changed the game from water conservation and addressing leaks, and I'll kind of show you some data here. So we're still kind of new in it. We're trying to understand how to analyze the data from our interactions with customers. The nice thing is it's pretty cheap. If we need to go out to the leak, it costs about $50 to roll a truck, salary, and usually we can find the problem. We did a study back in, this was in 2021, and what we looked at was if they didn't have AMI and noticed the leak, how much water would they have used by the time they got their bill? We're getting about 500 to 1,000 leak notifications per day. Back in 2021, we have a lot more meters now. And what we found was that just on the leaks we found, we had about a 12 million gallon per month savings at 50% saturation, and us really not fully understanding how to use the data. So this is going to continue to be a big thing for us. We have an AMI team that's not part of conservation that is growing. We deal with AMI data on our side as well. And again, as we get to that period of time where everybody's more and more and more efficient, these are the types of tools that help people remain at that efficiency level. So let me talk about new development a little bit. This is where I spend a lot of my time because of my background before joining Aurora Water. And we've really tried to look at new development and figure out how do we build the right way. I was at the Colorado Water Congress giving a presentation, and I said, I can't wait, and it may not be within my career. I can't wait till we're done talking about converting landscapes, because we're building them right to start with, right? Let's get through that period of our life in water conservation. Let's be done with that. Let's quit paying to take out bluegrass, because we've got it done and we're building correctly from the start. This program was one of the first programs that I got to work on when I joined Aurora Water back in 2013, 2014. We developed this. The Z-Zone program was a collaboration between us and the development community. When we talk about new development, you have to have collaboration with the development community. That's who's being impacted. They're the ones building your city. They're the ones selling the home. So you got to have that relationship. We had a change in our tap fee structure. It was driving up the cost for the outdoor portion of the tap fee. And the developers were like, yeah, I don't like this. We said, okay, well, how do we work together to get something you want, which is a little bit lower of a tap fee, and get something we want, which is a bunch of less bluegrass out there that nobody's playing on. So the Z-Zone program, Z stands for zero water use. It said, wherever you put in native grasses, we won't charge you any tap fee for it. We'll give you allocation for 3 years to irrigate that native grass to get it established. And after 3 years, we'll reduce your allocation by the amount that was allocated for the native grass. That was the original version in 2015. And in that case, we were putting in these temporary meters for those native grasses areas. And in 2016, we changed it. 2016, we said we could do better. Not only will we put it all on 1 meter for you, so you don't have to build 2 separate irrigation systems, but now you're going to sign the same allocation agreement I talked about for that large rebate we did. So you pay a smaller tap fee. You're agreeing this is the amount of water you're going to use. If you use more, you get to start paying that what we call a capital recovery fee. You're paying back tap fee that you said you didn't need up front. And that water is very expensive. We're going through an update on how that works, but currently, if you exceed your allocation in the first half of the year, you pay triple the rate for the remainder of the year. If you exceed in the second half, you pay double. That adds up very quick. But it's an agreement. You said you're going to use this amount of water. That's how much you're getting allocated. You use more, you pay a bunch more. We get what we want. They get what they want. It's a great partnership. The biggest thing in new development, and the thing I think I talked about for the last 2 years at different presentations, was Aurora's Ordinance 2022-46. The use-based connection fees are kind of what I just talked about. We also have inclining block rate structure, which is conservation oriented. But really what the ordinance did was it was kind of that turf ban, if you will, right? That's what everybody wants to call it. So in Southern Nevada, they've had a law since, I believe, 1993 that said you can't put turf in the front yard of a residential community. You can't have what we would call non-functional turf for commercial spaces. Whoever came up with the word tree lawn, I wish never would have. It's the area between the curb and the sidewalk. That is a strip of grass. I guarantee you have never seen 2 kids throwing a football or kicking a soccer ball out there. It is lawn to be lawn. And so Aurora was the first municipality in the state to actually say, we're done. We're done having all of this non-functional turf. We're not the only one now, but we were the first back then. And what it does is it strictly limits the use of what we consider cool season turf. The way that's defined in the ordinance is anything that uses more than that 15-inch number that I talked about earlier. If you use more than 15 inches of precipitation a year or of irrigation a year, it's considered high water use or cool season turf. So no turf in new front yards. Backyards are limited to 500 square feet or 45%, whichever is less. No turf in, no non-functional turf in commercial spaces, common areas, multifamily, medians. All of these places where for the last 50 years, we've been laying down Kentucky bluegrass and watering it and the adjacent street and the adjacent sidewalk for no benefit to the community. We also banned the development of any new golf courses in the city of Aurora with cool season turf. There is one more that will be built that was approved prior to the ordinance. Yes. You know, it's funny. I got a bunch of slides just on the ordinance, but for the sake of time, I didn't want to dive too deep. We got a bunch of support from my community. So we sent out a survey. The lowest support number we had was 66% of residents said, we approve of no new golf courses, which means like 44% of people golf, right? Because they want new golf courses probably. And I get it, you know, you don't expect 100%, but you send those surveys out to kind of judge where people's minds are at. And what we're seeing in Aurora and all across Colorado is change in value of water. And that's kind of where I think conservation is continuing to just expand, and we're seeing all these great numbers because we could have all the programs we want. If the customers don't embrace it, and we don't do a good job about communicating, you know, it's not just about conservation, it's water literacy. How do we communicate where our water's coming from? How to use it, variability in snowpack. You have to educate, and then people will buy in, and we're really seeing that. And my next couple of slides will show kind of that change in distribution. So back to this a little bit. So no new golf courses, but what we wanted to do is make sure we're preserving those community spaces where turf makes sense. Now there's other turfs that aren't Kentucky bluegrass to use way less water. That's even better. But it's still allowed in what we call programmed active use spaces. So that's sports fields, gathering spaces at parks. What we're trying to get rid of is that grass that just looks cool because it's green, and that's the only. So the successes portion, I like the next chart better, but I'll talk about this one. This one goes back to 1976, and it charts the change in population and the change in water consumption. How many times have I mentioned this year? 2002. That's when we saw the first drop because we had to, right? That was the reactionary period. That's when conservation really, really kicked off in the Front Range, especially in Aurora. And so you can see that, you know, if you look at the end of the trend line on the blue line, it still trends up year to years, up and down. A lot of that is dependent on weather, and people do. That's what you want to see. If you see this steady line, even if it's flat, that's not a bad thing, but it means people aren't adjusting based off of the needs of the year. So you're going to see these up and downs. But what this is showing that is if the increase in distribution trended the way it was trending before 2002, we would be outpacing population. This is my favorite chart. So what this is charting is, if we look, we don't talk about GPCD too much in Aurora, mostly because GPCD, gallons per capita per day, can be calculated in many different ways. And so when you get utilities that say, this is my GPCD, and another one says, this is my GPCD, and the first one goes, well, mine's way better, haha. And you go, well, how did you calculate it? Because the simplest way is to take your population and your total annual distribution and you just divide them. Well, the problem is that as your user base shifts, you can impact those numbers. For example, if the population of Aurora stayed at 400,000 for the next 15 years, but our commercial industrial use continue to peak or continue to increase, it drives your GPCD up because your population's the same, but your water use is up. So we're really careful with that. There are ways we do look at like indoor residential only, but for the sake of this, I'm okay with using the number because we have had an increase in commercial and industrial use. And if I were to take that out, it would only make this look better, and it already looks really good. So I'm okay leaving it in. But what this chart is, the blue is the acre feet per year. Green is service population. Red is if we were to have trended in distribution at the same rate as the 2002 GPCD, but with today's population. So if we use the same amount of water per person in 2002, if we were using that same amount today, we would be distributing 71,200 acre feet. Or not. 54,000. It's shift of about 36%. Now, we can't take all the credit for that on just our water conservation programs, like the rebates, but that's where the education comes in. That's where the changing the values and the mindset and all of that impacts the overall picture, right? If we were at 72,000, we would have been in a lot of trouble this year. Much more trouble than we were, even as bad off as we were. So just kind of wanted to end with that. A lot of good things going on in conservation in the state and the Southwest overall. And this is a result of our customers doing the right thing and starting to understand conservation. So we still got a long ways to go, but I think we're doing a good job. So with that, I will open it up to questions. You can't read yet. I'm giving you a hard time.
Well, I have some questions.
Okay.
So we heard from Emily Hunt last week, and she said something that was very surprising to me, and that was that they don't count water that they can serve as firm yield for their water supply. Do you all? And is that like a common thing for municipalities?
That's a good question. I'd probably defer more to our resources team. I mean, we've never, it's not, I guess to answer your question more directly, when we look at all of our yield, I can't see myself on there, so hopefully they can see. It's not part of our annual yield numbers, right? It becomes part of the overall supply, but in our big spreadsheet that has all of our yields in there and our, in some cases, other obligations. So water that's going out before it gets into the city, conservation isn't really a number on there. The challenge is if you were to look at like we do an annual report every year and we look at all of the programs that we can directly tie a conservation savings to. So back to that, where we can analyze the water use and say, this change is because you did this. Those numbers are on an annual basis, pains me to say this, often insignificant to the overall picture, right? So we could say we saved 300 million gallons this year. That's really cool, and it's a good percentage of water, but you're talking, 1 to 2%. So we distribute about 18 billion gallons. So it's a small percent, but it starts to add up. And then you see, like on the last slide, where now you're taking the water that you can, the savings, we call it a consumption change, not a savings number, because one year it went the other way. And so we decided to call it consumption change numbers. As you add those up, it becomes significant. And as you see the numbers with all of the passive conservation that comes from all the other programs that you can't say, they went to a class and then they saved 10,000 gallons. So it would be difficult to say, you proved you saved 100 million gallons, and now we're going to count that as for you. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I guess it's like, how do we not framing it as towards yield for water supply? How is that helping the supply demand gap, as we go forward?
Yeah, I think the best way to answer that would be kind of, again, back to that last chart and looking at, this is where we would have been. I mean, you could count that. I mean, not as an annual yield. I mean, I guess you could. It's more of a reduction in demand. And so that kind of relationship between those, it's either yield or demand. You could count it either way. You could say, I'm going to count it as yield, but then I'm not going to offset the demand, but the demand kind of is a hard number. So.
I had a question about the commercial and HOA GRIP program, which is amazing. But I was wondering what kind of ongoing support, or if you do provide any ongoing support for green industry professionals to learn how to manage those landscapes so that they are actually using less water.
Yeah, great question. So the question for those in here was, what kind of support has been being offered for green industry professionals on how to manage those landscapes? There's a lot of conversation going on around that at more of a regional level. There's the Governor's Urban Landscape Task Force, which I'm a member on, and we've talked about that pretty extensively. Aurora at one time had a contractors kind of certification class, if you will. We ended up getting the same, like 5 contractors 3 years in a row. And so a lot of the voluntary stuff is kind of hard. You'll see some municipalities that have requirements for some training. And when you require it, you kind of make them go. in order to do business in your community. I think though, as a group, I mean water conservation professionals, one of the questions that we need to continue asking is, what's the role of the individual municipality? What's the role of water conservation teams within municipalities versus what's the role of the industry? And those conversations are being had. They've been going on for a long time. So I guess the short answer to your question, Aurora specific, no, we do not have anything special for the green industry from a training certification type program. Question number one, yes, sir.
I was curious as to what internships or water offers.
Perfect. I'm glad you asked. Yeah. So, I was, Karen and I were talking at the beginning about water conservation and working there again. I've been there 12 years. From an internship standpoint, we do hire 6 interns every year. We usually start hiring pretty early on so that the students can have a game plan for the summer. So we don't post those in May. We'll start posting ours in February. Ours tend to be in 2 different categories. We have 2 internships that work in our demonstration garden, a little bit more horticulture based, but as an internship, you don't have to have a horticulture background to do those. And the other 4 internships are in our outdoor water assessment program. So we actually have a employee who graduated from here a couple years ago, worked for the exact same type of program here at Fort Collins Utilities, and then joined us full time, and he now runs that program for us. And that's more of a customer engagement efficiency program where we're going out to customers' homes and businesses. We're running through the irrigation systems and providing them with reports on how to be more efficient, how to fix things, make changes. Since we're on the topic, I will talk about water conservation, employment, careers in general. Water conservation is pretty unique because there's not really, I think I mentioned this earlier, I bet here you don't have a bachelor's degree in water conservation, right? We all come at it from different roles. So out of our 9 full-time employees, I'm a landscape architect. The supervisor that works under me has, I believe, a master's in planning. The guy that Adam that leads our data and program support team has a degree in history. We have somebody with a data science background. We have 2 people with a bunch of field experience. So one of the really unique things about water conservation teams is you have a bunch of backgrounds, and the really cool part is now you have a bunch of different lenses to look at problems and issues. Instead of, hey, we need to design this road, now I got 5 engineers looking at it. We all have different perspectives, a different educational. So it's a unique place to work and a great place to work. Someone else had a question. Yes.
Yeah, when you talk about water conservation, do you also find both doing jobs in the place like the one to you also find that how you
yeah, so there's some long-term planning. We're wrapping up what we call our IWMP Integrated Water Master Plan Part 2, and it's looking out to 2160. So there's a shorter period of time which falls into the CIP Capital Improvements Plan. It's kind of hard to project out to 2160. That's when we're projecting full build out. But yeah, we're starting to look 100 years down the road. What's the city going to look like? What's the water resources we're going to need? How do we protect ourselves the best we can from drought? And there's a couple ways, right? One is we got to be as efficient as we can be. We have to make sure we're developing sustainably, and we need to have buckets of water. And that's where storage comes into play. Aurora's working on a new reservoir, Wild Horse Reservoir up in Park County, fairly near our Spinning Mountain Reservoir, which will be our new largest reservoir. And if you go, well, you just showed me a chart that said your reservoirs haven't been full in a while. Why do you need another? Well, let's take this year. So we're currently about 85% full because we had last year's incredible rebound. If we get a bunch of snowpack this year, we may not have anywhere to put it. And so it's kind of this emergency bucket that the years where you have that supply, that yield, you got to capture it. And so that you have it for later. There's a chat. Let's see if there's a question. If there's not a question, but Kate Collins, Fort Collins Utilities is going to do a second work session tonight. Oh, cool. So Fort Collins is, I hope I can, well, you put it in the chat, so it's public. Um, Fort Collins is doing a second reading tonight with an ordinance for limiting lawns and increasing high efficiency irrigation regulations. So great job, Fort Collins. You guys are doing fantastic work up there. And I think that's the only question on here. So, yes. Yeah.
And it kind of points at, you know, the regional, I guess, beyond like going to conferences and hearing other utilities, like what they're doing, how much is there regional sharing and collaboration on some of the strategies and programs and stuff that y'all use?
Yeah, there's a lot. I would say probably better than a lot of professions. So we have multiple groups. There's a Rocky Mountain section, RMS AWWA, we like acronyms, conservation chapter that has a bunch of the front range utilities in it. I'm on the board of a nonprofit, Colorado Waterwise. There's the Urban Landscape Task Force that I mentioned. We have a very good relationship between the water conservation groups. We can all call each other. We all steal each other's programs. Like, did you see what they did? That's super cool. And so, yeah, it's a great, just like the collaboration within the division at work, that's allowed outside too. There's no, that's my program. We're not sharing how we came up with it. It's like, hey, we did this and it worked. Here you go. So it's really cool. We all kind of have not really the same goal. We're doing kind of back to the very beginning. We're dealing with our own little, portfolios of water and our watersheds and our communities, but we share the same passion. We share the same big goals. Yeah.
And it seems like, I guess, in terms of water supply and it's kind of like,
Yeah, supply is a little bit different. There's such a limited resource on the supply side. We're not fighting over anything on conservation. We're all trying to help each other. It's not, if I do something doesn't mean they don't get it, so it's different. Thank you.